Hey guys, so what I wanted to talk about today is something that's very near to my heart, and that's Star Trek. Now, when I was growing up, I was never much of a Star Trek nerd. In fact, I haven't really watched most of the series. I never watched the original series. I watched a little bit of The Next Generation, and I watched a little bit, even less, of Deep Space Nine. What I watched growing up was Voyager. Now, the reason for that wasn't really because that I had a particular fondness for that series. It's that on the Science Channel, the series would always have like a 24/7 marathon, like every year. And me and my brother would watch the series. Now, I know Voyager is not seen as the best Star Trek series of all time. A lot of people seem to really like Deep Space Nine. I never really got into the premise of it. And I'm not a super nerd. I don't think I watched like any of the movies, like ever. I do remember a few series, like episodes here or there for The Next Generation. I think there was like one. I know this one. One of the ones from The Next Generation that really stuck with me is the episode where a human got trapped on an alien planet by a species that had taken over his ship. And he was left marooned there for the rest of his life. And in order to make him comfortable, they put up a hologram based on a book he had in a ship. And it was like a bad, like, romantic, like, book about, like, a casino. And it's like a murder mystery. And Data, I believe, Captain Picard and maybe Riker got stuck in the hologram and they couldn't get out. So they eventually find the body of the human, and then they find his journal, and it's like, he explains that the alien stopped his ship, and instead of like taking him somewhere, they left him on the planet and set up this hologram based on this like really cheap novel. And they couldn't figure out how to shut it down so that they could get teleported off. So in the end of the episode, Data plays craps, and he wins so much money at the casino that he's able to buy the whole hotel, which breaks the program because that's not the intended ending of the book, and it allows them to get out. Because what the series does, interestingly enough, is that it'll go through the entire story of the book, and then once it gets to the end, it'll go back to the beginning. So they have to break sequence in the hologram, in the story, in order to like cause it to glitch out. So it will open up and allow a transporter beam to be shot out. Star Trek is a very interesting series. And people will say that like Star Trek has always been woke. And it really hasn't. I mean, you can say that it kind of abides by liberal principles, but it's never been a woke series. Since Gene Roddenberry wrote the original series, I almost said the original trilogy, thinking of Star Wars there for a second. Ever since Gene Roddenberry wrote it, it has like kind of a liberal stint to it, but it's never been woke. It's been more about the action, about exploring, about being hopeful about humanity. So it's a real shame where the series like eventually turned out. There's the original series, then that was followed by The Next Generation, and that was followed by Deep Space Nine, which then played side by side with episodes of the Next Generation. They were being produced at the same time, but the Next Generation was started first. And then when the Next Generation ended, they then started Voyager. And then Deep Space Nine ended. They refused to take risks when they made Voyager, and that caused the ratings to drop. And then Voyager had to be canceled eventually. Because one, they were using UPN, their own publishing company. And UPN had access to 85% of televisions in the country. So, instead of 100%. So logically, the series was down 15% of the viewership that it should have had. UPN was just badly managed, and eventually it got bought out. I don't know by who off the top of my head. Then eventually a bunch of movies. Then we got Star Trek Enterprise, which was a prequel to all of the series. I think that ended after 3 or 4 seasons. I'm not 100% sure. Then eventually we would get Lower Decks, which is an animated cartoon, which kind of reminds me of a more kid version of Rick and Morty. And then they had Star Trek Discovery. And I'm not sure if there's another series I'm missing here. But anyways, I've been kind of neglecting a lot of the political videos that I normally watch, and instead I've been trying to get through a whole bunch of Star Trek videos and making a playlist on it. That playlist is about 1,000 videos long so far. Some of those I had already watched, and I had saved in a different playlist, but I'm rewatching all the ones that I haven't seen in a long time. One channel that I'm kind of fond of, and it seems to be made by a guy with autism or something like that, by the way the dude speaks. The channel name is April 5th, 2063, which, if you don't know that reference, in Star Trek, that is when they originally developed the warp drive. That's when they tested out the warp drive. And it's considered First Contact Day because the Vulcans noticed the activation of the warp drive, and that's when they came to Earth to introduce themselves to humanity. Again, Star Trek has always been kind of a liberal series. In the original series, they had a whole bunch of minorities acting alongside the main actor, William Shatner, which was very unusual for the time, and they gave them major roles. And in the show, they have a lot of responsibility. They're high-ranking officials, which for a series made in, dear Lord, when was the original series made? Was it the 60s and 70s? Was it that early? I'm not 100% sure, honestly. But it was a big series. But people who watched Star Trek and enjoyed it, this is how you know that Star Trek itself wasn't woke. Because when they started, and I'm talking about George Takei here now, okay? When George started getting more and more into politics, people really don't like the kind of ignorance that he tries to spread. The guy is absolutely off his rocker. In fact, at one point, a few years back, George Takei is gay, right? And no one really cared. Everyone appreciated that, you know, he was like one of the first Asian guys to act alongside white actors like William Shatner, and that he had a major role. But a few years back, he came out and tried to defend the LGBT community. And I don't have any problems with LGBT. But once it got really political and started pushing the transgender stuff, I didn't appreciate it. But George Takei came out and he wanted to snap back at those homophobes. And he said that when he was a 13-year-old kid, he discovered he was gay when he had sex with a full-grown man. And he tried to convince people that that was a good thing. And it was supposed to be and the headline said it was the perfect snapback to the homophobes. And everyone's like, wait, you were 13? You got molested? And you're trying to convince us this is a good thing? It was absolutely incredible to see them try to push that line of thinking. Oh yeah, it's totally fine being gay. You know, like, I was just a little kid who got molested by a full-grown man, but, you know, that's fine, that's alright. It's like, well, that kind of explains a lot about you, George, actually. Because, like, William Shatner apparently wasn't, like, the nicest man to work with. He was kind of a diva. Fun fact, one time I, like, on Twitter, I, like, replied to one of his comments, and I can't remember what it was about, but I was disagreeing, like, about something, and he actually responded and got kind of mad at me, and then a bunch of his fans got mad at me. One of them said, it's like, you really don't know much about Shatner. Nowadays, like, yeah, probably back then I didn't know, like, anything about Shatner. But, like, George Takei really didn't like William Shatner. And he, like, complained about, like, how he was a diva, and he kind of, like, ruined the series for him, and, like, it makes reunions really difficult, and, like, you don't want to work in, like, another, like, capacity on Star Trek with William. And that, it was just like, you know, maybe Shatner wasn't as much of a problem as we thought, because if George Takei is the type of individual, if his trauma is indicative of the cast and crew of the original series, then yeah, maybe they just had deeper issues going on. And when they started, like, making Star Trek Discovery, and they made it about more woke topics, like, for instance, in Star Trek Discovery, everyone made fun of this, and I'm pretty sure the ratings absolutely tanked for the series after this, and people basically stopped even talking about it or even reviewing the episodes after, like, that one episode. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, again, a lot of people who watch the original series love Star Trek, and they were watching Star Trek Discovery until this particular episode came along, in which case I think a bunch of them just stopped caring. So in the episode, humanity goes to a society, and I'm not sure if it's a pre-warp society or if it's a society that just started to develop warp technology. But it's a modern society like we would see nowadays on our planet. Sometime between, like, our technology level now and our technology level between now and 2063 when they developed the warp technology. And there was like a huge protest going on, and it seemed inevitable that this planet was going to go to war with itself, and it was going to use devastating weaponry, like nuclear weapons kind of stuff. So the captain in Discovery makes a speech, and he plays it on every TV monitor in the world, hijacking their like TV and radio systems. So like in their equivalent of Town Square, he plays the speech, and everywhere else on the planet. And basically he explains that everything changed in 2024. Which, okay, this is an American show right before the 2024 election, talking how everything went to shit in 2024. And then he says that a war started. And at first, it was considered a minor war. It was like a civil war, I think he says. And then he says it became the eugenics war. And then it became World War III. Now, this has always been a major part of Star Trek. That the warp technology was built right after the Third World War. And that caused humanity to give up completely on war with itself and form maybe not a united government, but a more effective version of the United Nations. And it didn't become the Federation until like 100 years after the first warp drive was made. Or like 150 years after the first warp drive was made. Something along that lines. And everyone was talking about like, okay, so they're saying everything goes to shit after 2024. So obviously we saw a bunch of woke stuff in the series. This is an American show. So they're obviously saying that the American presidential election of 2024 caused the controversy and then caused World War III to eventually occur. And it was like they were warning us, the show writers, that we have to be careful who we elect, because if it's that orange man, you know, everything's going to go to shit, and then we're going to end up in the Star Trek universe with a Third World War. And everyone just kind of rolled their eyes. And they're like, what, are you serious? There's a eugenics war in 2024? Like, who possibly could you be talking about that starts that war? And it's like, I remember watching Arch Warhammer's like episode on it. Like, he reviewed the episode, and then he's like, well, who's the one who always divides everyone by race? And that'd be the Democrats. So people were making the point, it's like, well, the people obsessed with race are the Democrats, not the Republicans. So if you're saying that everything goes to shit after 2024, then it would obviously be the Democrats that started it, right? And it was just like, people were just so fed up at that time. Woke stuff had completely fallen by the wayside, and they were just sick of it. And people just stopped watching the series. And it was just like, no more of this. This is stupid and bullshit. Like, drop it. Now, there have been Star Trek episodes about, like like fascist governments or about like climate change. But a lot of stuff that Star Trek does is just look at an interesting concept and explore them. And like Voyager Voyager went into the politics of other species, but it never went into like modern politics. It never said like, oh, this species is kind of like the Republicans, or this species is kind of like the Democrats. Hell, episodes they couldn't get away with anymore are the episodes where people like dress like the mid-century Germans. So in one of the episodes, there's this species called the Hirogen. And the Hirogen are like a hunting species. And they have spread through all out the Delta Quadrant, where Star Trek Voyager takes place. And they hunt in pairs. And occasionally they'll call a few other ships together, and they'll hunt in a pack of like 6 ships. Which is only like 12 people. The species is so spread out that one of the leaders of the Hirogen faction realizes that if they don't come together, they're going to die out in 1,000 years. They're just going to go extinct. So what he wants to do is he figures out that the Voyager has a holodeck, which can represent like fictional people, fictional creatures, and they can turn off like the safety measures on it, and then they can produce creatures or people that they want to hunt in the holodeck, and they can bring all their people together in like a big colony, and they can all just have a good time hunting in the holodeck instead of trying to spread out throughout the galaxy. So they all have a reason to come together, and it's a little bit safer, and they all like gather up in one place and just use the holodeck. And at the beginning of the episode, he dresses up as like a Klingon warrior. And then they capture the crew of Voyager, put them in a holodeck, tell them they have to expand the holodeck throughout much of the ship, and then they set the holodeck to play a scenario where they're in World War II France. And the Voyager crew is like the French underground resistance, and the Hirogens take on the aspect of the mid-century Germans. And in the episode, eventually the Hirogen asked the holographic mid-century German major, I really hate that I have to say mid-century German, by the way, instead of the actual name of the faction. But you know what? Everyone here knows what I'm talking about. And he asked the major, the hologram, is why they are the superior race. And the major says, well, we have been hunting here for 1,000 years before any of the other races showed up here. And the guy, he gets mad and he starts choking. Like, he gets in the guy's face. I think he even starts choking the dude. And he's like, you're not superior. Like, there's nothing about you that makes you superior over other humans. And it's not that the guy doesn't like the mid-century Germans, but from his point of view, you should never look down on anything that you hunt. Because if you look down on anything you hunt, you're setting yourself up for failure. You're like, oh, I'm so superior than this creature or this species that I'm hunting. And the guy's like, no, you're not superior. Like, you don't even give, like, the Jews a chance to fight back. You don't give anyone a chance to fight back. You just go in there with force, and it's so easy to hide behind your weapons. And, like, the dude doesn't make any point about, like, fascism. He's just like, no, you're not superior. And he basically breaks it down in terms of his own species and talks about how his species has to respect other cultures, other peoples, because if they don't, they're going to be killed and wiped out by those people. So you have to, like, it's not that you have to keep an open mind, it's that you have to study your prey. And he wants to stop hunting other species But that's not because he wants to stop the hunt. No, he just wants all his people to come together and reunite as a cohesive whole, which is why he wants the holodeck technology and to put it in place so that his people can train with holograms. And if they want to hunt something, it would be like when they go to war. It's not, he doesn't want to just like make an enemy of every faction that they come across and just hunt them for sport like they were before. He wants to kind of like make peace with the other factions, or at least leave them alone so they stop, like, you know, killing his people. And the whole episode is framed around the perspective of the Hirogen. It doesn't make the Hirogen into a Democrat. It doesn't make him into a social justice warrior. It doesn't make him into, like, someone who's liberal. Throughout the entire episode, he's hunting the Voyager crew like animals in the holodeck. And he's having other members of the Voyager crew improve the ship. He's taking everybody hostage. Now, he's telling them that it's like, he tells his people, like, okay, if you find them, don't kill them, capture them, let them go again, and we'll start the hunt all over again. Because we need them to build us holodecks. Like, they're just like a means to the, like, they're a means to the end. Like, we are not hunting these people for food or sport. We're hunting them for the love of the game, basically. And everything is framed in the perspective of his culture instead of the perspective of a liberal writer. And that's something Star Trek absolutely lost in the later series. Like, they have to frame everything from a liberal perspective. That, like, all the, basically, like, all the characters in Discovery are basically just, like, Democrats. Like, social justice warriors. And they go around and, like, preach about their morals and everything. And it's like, a lot of people just don't like it. The other series I was thinking about is Picard, by the way. Picard apparently was pretty terrible for the first 2 seasons, and then they made the Borg threatening again, which I've been watching some of the episodes. Not the episodes. I've been watching clips because I listen to these videos while I'm driving, so I can't actually watch the series, especially this close to Christmas. I'm working a lot. But I've been listening to a lot of the episodes and, like, watching a little bit of them. And they make the Borg threatening again in a way that doesn't really work for me. Like, in Deep Space Nine, they eventually make peace with the faction called the Dominion, which is in the Gamma Quadrant, but they're linked to the Alpha Quadrant where the series takes place by a wormhole. And there were a bunch of changelings that apparently were captured, and they were tortured, and they were released. Because the changelings, as their name implies, they can change into other species and pretend to be human. And they were spies. They got released, and then they were sent back to their homeworld, where they joined something called the Great Ocean. The changelings are a liquid species, and they can all kind of like coalesce together into like a giant like organic soup. And they can share their, like, minds and their experiences and their dreams. And then they can choose to get out of the Great Ocean and then act as individuals again. And in Star Trek Voyager, 10 of the changelings... in Star Trek Picard, 10 of the changelings decide that they want revenge, even though peace was declared, and the 2 factions are supposed to leave each other alone. And the changelings work with the Borg, I think, and they attack a ceremony in which every single starship of the Federation goes into Earth's orbit, and the Borg release, like, an airborne version of their nanoprobes, And the nanoprobes, for some reason, only infect, like, people under the age of 50. And everyone under the age of 50 turns into a Borg drone, like, instantaneously. And then they take over every single ship in the fleet. And their goal is to attack Earth, destroy the orbital platform, and then assimilate the whole planet. And I'm just like, I mean, that raises the stakes, but it's kind of a stupid way to do it. I mean, really, all of Starfleet is in orbit, and the Borg attack every single ship at the same time, and release these nanoprobes that take over like 90% of every crew on every ship. And humanity somehow survives that. And it's like, at that point, the Borg should just like bombard the planet like instantaneously, right? Or they should just like destroy everything like within seconds, within minutes, maybe. Like every single defensive structure in orbit on the planet, they can destroy like that. Like that. It's just, the new Star Trek writers just don't know how to write. They don't write good stories. They don't write good characters. They put woke stuff into everything. It's just ridiculous. It's insane. And I don't think they ever... One of the main things about Star Trek Voyager is a lot of people wanted Captain Janeway and Riker to get together, and they never do. And then they tried to pair off Riker with 7 of 9, which a lot of people were like, there's no relationship there. What the hell's going on? They tried to push a lot of stuff, and apparently Kate McGrew, the woman who played Janeway, was kind of a diva, and she didn't get along with the girl who played 7 of 9. Her name was Ryan, and from what I understand, is she kind of treated her like shit. She apologized for it years later, but I mean, she was a big diva back then, and then like it seemed like they tried to like cancel McGrew if she wasn't willing to like apologize for her behavior, is what it seemed like. And it's like, wow, this and a lot of stupid drama, a lot of stupid like leftist talking points. But anyways, that's all I wanted to talk about today. And it's just, yeah, a lot of Star Trek fans just didn't want to watch Star Trek when they started putting in all this stuff about like eugenics and like leftist like politics. It's because it's like there's no faction like in America that supports eugenics, and they imply that everything changed in 2024, and it's heavily implied that it's due to the American election, as if like Donald Trump is a fascist and that he's going to start the eugenics war. And it's just like, yeah, we were done. A lot of people were just done at that point. So before I go into circles, that's all I had to say, guys. That's it. Bye.